Cinder blocks do not make good raised beds. Hear me out. I know a lot of people use cinder blocks to make their raised beds. It's a very popular building material. However, there are a lot better options, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll agree with me. Now, you can grow however you want. Gardening is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but my goal is to set you up for success. And in my opinion, cinder blocks are kind of doing the opposite. The first reason why cinder blocks do not make good building materials for raised beds, as I'm building one to show you, they're inexpensive, absolutely, I'll give you that. They're inexpensive. However, they are heavy. The whole point behind a raised bed is to elevate the soil. And a lot of gardeners will go with cinder blocks because it will essentially allow them to elevate the soil. However, these cinder blocks here are 8 inches by 8 inches by 16 inches. Very standard dimension for a cinder block. So we're only getting an 8-inch tall raised bed that weighs, I've been lifting these things out of the car and setting them in place, and I'm already done with it. And this is a tiny raised bed. Quite literally, this raised bed right here is going to be a 4 foot by 4 foot raised bed, roughly. By the time it's all said and done, I needed these cinder blocks for another project. So I'm not actually just wasting money here. But let's say this cinder block raised bed was a 4 foot by 4 foot area. You're going to essentially have about 500 pounds just to grow in 16 square feet. The weight and effort required for the payoff you're going to get, I'm sorry, hot take, just isn't there. Not for me, at least. I would so much rather you go with a 10-inch board, whether that be pressure treated, standard yellow pine, or even cedar. Now, cedar is going to be more expensive, but in terms of lightweight and just how much the weight to effort, to what it's going to take to get that 16 square feet, you can buy some pretty inexpensive lumber that weighs way less compared to these cinder blocks, and get a deeper raised bed as well. Because the next part that limits cinder blocks to making a good viable raised bed, well, it's the size. So the size of the cinder blocks is really limiting you to your raised bed potential, because you can go long, you can go wide. They're very versatile in that regard. However, you have to go up in order to have a viable raised bed. And the reason why is because 8 inches, again, I'm just gonna say how it is, because my job is not to sugarcoat things. My job is to tell you sometimes things that you might not wanna hear, so that you inevitably have a better gardening experience in the long run. Because I could sit here and I could lie to you and say, 8 inches is gonna be fine. 8 inches is not going to be fine. Number one reason is because when you have 8 inches of soil, you're not going to be able to grow really just about anything long term. Yeah, you could grow things like lettuce or radishes, your very shallow rooted crops. But as soon as you throw a pepper or a tomato in there, forget it. That's not going to thrive in that. You ultimately need at least 10 inches at a minimum, preferably 12 inches or even 14 to 16 inches. If you're growing things like carrots, forget it. You can't grow carrots in 8 inches. You need at least 10 to 12 inches. Your deeply rooted crops, even potatoes, those absolutely need a deeper soil to grow in, and you're not going to get that from 8 inches. And again, these are 8 inch by 8 inch by 16 inch. So what are you going to have to do? Well, this weighed about 500 pounds. Well, you got to do it all over again. If you want a 16-inch deep raised bed, you've got to take one of these suckers and you got to sit it on top. Now you've got 16 inches. What's the next problem with a raised bed made of cinder blocks? Well, once you're up this tall, you now need to support it, because look at how easy this thing pivots. I'm not making this up. If you are not completely on level, and I mean exactly level ground, you've got to go by and you've got to scrape it with a flat square shovel to get it completely level, and you better use a bubble level or a spirit level, otherwise you're going to be off and the bricks are going to pivot very easily. There is no theater magic here. The tiniest bump, because this block here is higher than, or sorry, this block here is higher than this block, it pivots on that high point. And the moment you bump it, or the moment something shifts, your raised bed is going to lose all of its structural integrity. So what do you have to do next to lock them in place? Well, start off by interlocking them, but then people will say, consider running some rebar through. So now it's not just the weight of the cinder blocks, and it's not the cost of the cinder blocks and the time to set it up, but it's also then you have to take rebar and pound rebar through your holes to keep the blocks stationary so they're not shifting around. I'm sorry, I could have built 4 raised beds by the time it takes me to build one, and it's going to last just as long, and I will not be even 1/10 as fatigued. Look at this. We're talking one finger. Look, I could move this with my pinkies. Look at how easy this pivots. See that? That's because it's not level. Now if it's level, no shot. No shot. It's level. But as soon as you get on something that's not level, look at this. I mean, it spins like a top. Not happening. That is a terrible way to build a raised bed. Third reason is how brittle they are. Now, they're made out of concrete. Concrete is very porous. The problem is though, one tiny little chip or fracture, and they're going to break. You're going to lose corners. It's going to look really bad. Like I'm already looking at, I mean, we just got these out of the car. I've dropped them like one time, just accidentally. I already chipped the corner off that one. This one here, yeah, I chipped the corner on this one. Like you set them down wrong and they're going to fracture. Not to mention, they are porous. And what happens to porous material is it absorbs water. And when it absorbs water and it freezes over winter, it fractures very easily. In fact, just the pressure from the expansion when it freezes can split and crack cinder blocks. So all your efforts to do all of that could be completely in vain in the spring. When you come out to your garden and everything has thawed, you might have a bunch of broken cinder blocks you have to replace. Again, gardening is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that cinder blocks are good building material, because for me, they're just not a viable option. I would go with 100 other options to build a raised bed before I'd go with cinder blocks. So now we're gonna move on to the fourth reason why cinder blocks don't make a good viable option. And that also ties into the porosity and how easy they absorb water. And that's how fast they dry out. So like I said, cinder blocks are made out of concrete, and concrete is very porous, just like something made out of terracotta clay. When you have a porous material, it's going to absorb or wick moisture. And your plants, they need that moisture. So what happens is the blocks, because they're so porous, they will wick moisture out of the soil. And you're going to find that the perimeter around your garden will be so dry. And then what will happen is you'll have to compensate for that dryness, and you're going to water. The problem is the center of your raised bed will be plenty fine. If you have the right type of soil, your soil in the center of the raised bed is not going to dry out. So then you're going to play a game of musical watering where you have to water and let the center dry out. But then when the center dries out, there's no way to get adequate or consistent soil moisture unless you either overwater one or underwater another part of the raised bed. And that porosity is really going to fight you. You're going to fight it the whole season. Not to mention, when it freezes in the winter, the porosity lends to cracking, but also during the summer, it lends your plants to completely dry out along the perimeter. Now I know you're going to say, well, Luke, I've seen people plant the pockets out. Absolutely. People have planted the pockets out, for sure. I've seen it as well. And can you have success? Absolutely. But ask them how often they had to water these pockets. You can absolutely grow plants in these pockets. There is such little volume in these holes here. You might be able to grow a flower or two, maybe a basil plant, maybe a bean plant, something small like that, maybe a head of lettuce or something. But how fast those cells will dry out is just outrageous. Not to mention how fast the center dries out. Inconsistent watering is going to be your nemesis. It's going to be something you're going to be fighting every single week, all the time, using cinder blocks as raised bed material. And it's just something that I cannot recommend. My own experiences, I've used cinder blocks in my garden, and it's just not something that I find to be conducive to having a fun and successful garden. And the final reason why cinder blocks do not make a viable raised bed building material, in my opinion, has to do with heat conductivity. Raised beds made with cinder blocks are going to heat up dramatically more than raised beds made from galvanized steel, which tends to reflect the heat, or from wood, which tends to absorb the heat and kind of just retain it within the air pockets in the wood. You're going to find that raised beds made from metal, contrary to popular belief, a lot of people think that metal will get super hot. Well, you're not painting that metal matte black. It's galvanized, and it's galvanized steel, so it tends to actually reflect the heat. They actually tend to run cooler than the surrounding area because it reflects that heat away, especially if it's a light color like white or gray or even like cream color like that. It tends to reflect that heat, will not absorb it nearly as much. But then also wood has a lot of air pockets and helps to kind of buffer the heat from the outside temperature into your raised bed. Cinder blocks are not the case. Cinder blocks, because they have very little air gaps and because they're made from concrete, they're going to heat up, and they're going to heat up very fast. And when they heat up really fast, it's going to bake, and it's going to, again, expedite how fast your soil dries out. So what I found in my experience is that the perimeter, probably 1 to 4 inches into your raised bed, will heat up and dry out so much faster. It'll also, when it heats up your soil and stresses out your plants. If you have plants that do not like hot and dry conditions, they're not gonna like growing in a raised bed. And I guess in summary, my thing is, yes, these are only $2 per cinder block. Absolutely. This whole raised bed right here costs me about $15. $15 worth of cinder blocks. But again, I have to double that. So I have to take into account, that's gonna be about $30 for 16 square feet of growing space. What I'd much rather you do is to invest in some lumber. Our raised beds at our house were made with just dimensional white pine, yellow pine, builder grade stuff, not even pressure treated. And accounting for today's prices with lumber prices, a 40 square foot raised bed would run you about $32. $2 more for more than double the space. It's not only lighter, it will not heat up, it will not crack. Yes, it will rot, but you're gonna get 7 to 8 seasons. We have 7 seasons with those raised beds. They're going on their 8th season at our house. They have not yet completely rotted. Some have been replaced, but by and large, most are in totally fine condition and are gonna get 1 or 2 more seasons. We're probably looking at around 8 to 9 seasons for a $32 investment. And on top of that, they are much taller as well. They are 12 inches deep, giving us a nice deep soil bed for us to grow in. We don't have to stack up the weight. We don't have to worry about it being completely level. It is just so much better. If you look at the galvanized steel route for the raised beds, you're going to spend, yes, they are a little more expensive. You're gonna spend about $150 to $180, somewhere in there. We have 2 different sized raised beds. They are coming back in stock, by the way, pretty soon. We got more on that in a little bit. But those, they have a lifetime warranty. They're gonna last for 25, 30, 40 years. And they are incredibly lightweight, very portable, and they're nice and deep. So you have 2 options for raised beds. You can also just completely skip this option. You can find some logs from the woods. You can go to Habitat for Humanity and get just reclaimed wood. There are so many options for building raised beds. It does not have to come from the store. I want to be very crystal clear. You can go out to the woods, find logs, and cut some logs and make those. They might be a little heavy, but you can make your own raised beds just from that. Again, the whole purpose behind a raised bed is to hold soil up. You're retaining the quality in your raised bed so that your plant roots are going to thrive. You're gonna have better moisture capabilities, better nutrient capabilities. You're gonna have better aeration. And ultimately, you're not going to be stepping in your raised bed, compressing and compacting the soil. It allows you to work your bed from a variety of different angles and gives your plants better health. It doesn't matter. Your plants do not care what you make your raised bed from. I want to be so crystal clear there, because so many people, they go out and they think that their raised beds have to win some beauty pageant, when in reality, it just needs to hold soil up. And I'd be the last person to care what my raised beds look like as long as my plant health reflects the effort and the time and the money that I put into my garden, as well as what I'm getting out of my garden. As long as that happens, I don't care what they're made from. So there's your hot take for the day. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. If you did, make sure to throw a like up there. Subscribe if you haven't already. Comment down below if you agree with me. Even if you disagree with me, I'll take it. Like I said, gardening is not a one-size-fits-all solution. I know there are plenty of people that use cinder blocks for their garden, and plenty of people that will say they have no problem at all. And that's fine as well. I just would question how much work they're putting into their garden to make their results kind of what they're expecting, because I think there's better options, but that's just me. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, this is Luke from the My Gardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting mygardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care. Bye.